Well, hello, Business on Purpose family. Thomas Joyner, Director of Coaching here. Wanted to introduce you to our founder, Scott Beebe. We're excited to come to you today. We are going to introduce a little something different today. What you normally hear on the Business on Purpose podcast is just kind of some short hitters, some quick hitters when it comes to just how to run your business. And so we thought what would be really helpful would be how can we introduce some conversations so you guys can see behind the scenes a little bit, can hear really what we're doing with small business owners, how we are facilitating this, liberating them from chaos, and helping them make time for what matters most. So today we are going to dive in on vision. We're going to work through our Business on Purpose roadmap. And if you really want to see where that's headed, you can head on over to mybusinessonpurpose.com/roadmap. That'll give you everything you need to see on a roadmap. But today we are going to stay laser focused on vision. Scott and I are going to kind of throw some questions back and forth to each other, give you some great behind the scenes on everything. And so, Scott, why don't you kick us off this morning with really just talking about vision and what do you include in vision, right? Like it's kind of this buzzword that whenever we kind of meet with businesses and we talk about vision, they kind of roll their eyes, right? They've heard it 100 times, but when you're including and talking about vision, what are you asking a business owner to do?
Yeah, it's become sort of this corporate blah, 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 right? And we talk about this all the time as a team. And vision, actually, when we think about our business with Business on Purpose, it was the very first thing that we ever did as a business, both ourselves and as an offering, as a service offering to clients, was a full day vision, mission, values workshop. And to your point, by going to mybusinessonpurpose.com/roadmap, you'll see that Thomas and I will be talking about mission and values down the road. That's a part of the roadmap. We'll spend a little bit of time on it here today, but we're really going to, as Thomas mentioned, laser focus in on vision. And the reason is this goes back, a lot of us think that vision, mission, values is a Peter Drucker methodology, a Jim Collins, good to great, kind of a modern business philosophy out of Harvard Business or whatever. Vision is as old as the earth. It's as old as civilization. In fact, for whatever you might believe, there's a large part of the population that believes in this idea of creationism, which is vision. There's got to be some sort of vision in order for something to be created. And whether or not there's a foundation in what you believe from a spiritual religious standpoint, we can now moving forward say that in order for anything to be created, first, there's got to be some sort of vision. But to your point, Thomas, I do feel like when people come, 80-90% of them kind of roll their eyes a little bit when they talk about vision.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think when we build vision stories, right, that's kind of our tool that we use. When we build vision stories out with people, I think one of the pitfalls that I see most frequently is just a lack of detail, right? Is they are writing things down and they want to keep it broad because they're afraid of, well, what happens if I don't hit it? You know what I mean? And we'll look at that and we'll almost say, no, let's figure out to the dollar, what do you want to make? Right. And so let's figure out what does your team need to look like and some of that stuff. And so I think there's a general fear out there of, well, if I spell it out super clearly, I'm going to be held responsible to actually put a plan in place to get there versus just, well, let's just wing it and work really, really hard. And wherever we end up, Scott, when you're working with business owners, what all do you include in their vision story?
Well, it's one of the things, and across our team as coaches, we all include 7 major categories that we found to be really helpful. And they're all based on this foundational ideology that's actually found in Jewish literature thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And it was said, write the vision down so that those who read it may run. And we always like to joke about that. It doesn't say which way they'll run. They might run towards the vision and towards you, or they might run away from the vision and away from you. But the reality is, in fact, we just wrote a blog post. There'll be another podcast coming out about this, talking about the leader's tension between controlling and then being under control and the difference between those two things. Well, one of the reasons that leaders often move into mandate dictatorial control mindset is because they don't have clarity on where they're going. And the leader who shows self-control, being under control, usually those are the leaders that start that start out with a clarity of vision. So, we've got 7 categories. I'll talk about the first couple, Thomas, and you can finish up with the rest. The first one we got to talk about is the time. How far out is that vision? And back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, a popular vernacular was 10-year vision, 15-year vision, 25-year vision. And there were so many that had that vision 2020, right? That was the tagline. Nonprofits, churches, businesses, vision 2020.
Sure.
Well, now at the time of this recording, we've blown past 2020, and 2020, dare I say, was nothing close to what people envisioned 10 years prior with a pandemic. And so we kind of look and go, the 10, 15, 20, that's fine. That's okay. But I know you and I have talked about this. We're seeing more clarity when we can bring that vision duration within 18 months, 36 months, 3 years, 4 years, 2 years. And so we start with the timeline. How far out do you see the future destination of your business? And that's the definition of a vision, is the detailed future snapshot of your vision. And when you see that snapshot, how far out there is that? And it probably shouldn't be any more than 18, 24, 36 months. And so we start there with a timeline. Then we pivot into the second category, which really throws a lot of people off. And that's the family freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've heard people tell you, Thomas, I thought this was a business vision. And you have to respond. Our team has to respond. Well, life and business necessarily intersect. And so before we ever get into the business, we've got to get into the life. And Thomas, you were talking earlier about this idea that people don't want to get specific. This is the first category that they start trying to act broad.
Oh, yeah.
And why don't you talk about how we have to really start to corral them in to getting more detailed?
That's a great point. And to comment on what you said just a minute ago of why we shorten it to 18 months to 36 months, I think imagine in 2019, somebody had a 3-year, a 4-year vision, and you're like, wait a minute, we almost have to throw that out the window because of everything that happened in there. There's just too many variables for things that can change and tweak when we're looking at these 10 and 15-year visions. And so why not just build a 1 to 3 year one and then say, great, all right, we take the blinders off, we come up for air, and now we build the next one out, and so it allows you to get in a rhythm of redefining and then resetting and recasting the vision. But yeah, I think a lot of times in the family and freedom, people will look at me and they'll say, well, I want to spend quality time with my kids, or, I want to be in a good place with my spouse. And you're like, all right, if we look up in 12 months, how do I know that you're getting quality time with your kids? And what does quality time mean to you? Is that I don't want to miss a game? Is that I want to coach a team? I want to do pancakes at 8:30 a.m. the second and fourth Saturday of every single month. Boom. That is specificity. I want to do a date night to these spots, 20 times over the course of this year. We want to take a 4-day trip to Disney World and ride the, Space Mountain 14 times. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's getting as specific and as granular as that so that we can come back and either check the box or don't. And so I think it's not letting ourselves off the hook, right? And saying, all right, because I know if it's written down and it's on there, I've got to make a plan in order to do it. And so I think that's where so much of the power comes in, is just writing it down. And I think a lot of people are scared of that conversation because they feel inadequate and they feel like, well, man, I don't exactly know what I want. And so one of my favorite quotes is we're unexamined people living unexamined lives. And I think that's so true when it comes to the family and the freedom side of this, is we don't want to sit down and do the mental work of, oh yeah, what do I really want? It's easier to just go and go and go.
Yeah. And that leads to that third category, because if we want the specificity that you're talking about within our family and our freedom, and even that freedom section is what do you want to be able to commit to work? Some of the people listening right now, we work primarily with business owners between 2 and 50 employees. And they're staying up at 11:30 at night doing, bidding and estimating if they're in the infrastructure construction space, or they're doing back end billing. They might be in the client services, medical, architecture, legal space, or whatever.
Yep.
And they're sitting in their homes and they're looking around at all these people that they're funding, but they're not spending time with them.
Yep.
And so we've got to start asking, all right, with the family, this is what we want to do with specifics. With my freedom, this is what I want my time to look like. We just met with a business owner Tuesday. He put on there that in 2 years, He wanted to no longer be working on Fridays. He wanted Fridays to be completely
Hmm.
off of work, headspace out, everything out. I'm not saying that's what everybody should do, but that's what he wanted to do. And then we move to that third category, which is how do we fund all of that? How do we provide the money for all of that? Well, and we'll talk about this on another podcast way, way down the roadmap. You'll see something on there called the financial barn. So if you go to mybusinessonpurpose.com/roadmap, you'll see at the end financial barn. Well, what that financial barn does is it allows you as a household to identify how much is needed to fund all of that family and freedom that you want to have. And then when you can take that number and come plug it into the third section of the vision story, and that is your finances. And we want to start with profit margin/salary first, which will then help us determine what the total revenue is, because so many businesses, they just want to grow, right? For no particular reason. We just want to get bigger, bigger, bigger. Well, do you need to be that big? Because with big comes burden, responsibility, all sorts of stuff that we look at. I remember talking to a business owner one time who was doing $3 million a year. So where do you want to be in I think it was 5 years at that point. And he said, I want to do 50 million. And I said, all right, well, let's take 3 into 50 and whatever that, I don't like to do math out loud, but whatever that multiple is. And then let's sort of apply that to personnel and all those sorts of things. It doesn't scale 1-to-1, but you get the point. And I said, do you want to manage a business that big? He was like, no, I've got no interest in doing that. Okay, well, then we don't need to be a $50 million company. Yep. And so this really forces them. So timeline, family freedom, and then the finances, which tells us how to fund that family freedom. And then we've got a couple other categories there.
Yeah, I feel like that really springboards you into another conversation that you kind of kicked on, is personnel, right? If these are the financials that we want to hit, what does the team need to look like, and how does it need to grow to hit these future goals? Mm-hmm. And like you just said, I've sat there numerous times, and all right, if we want to hit 5 million, 10 million, you want a sales team of 5 people? No, I don't want to manage 5 sales guys with differing personalities, and they're, flying all over the place trying to do this and that. And then, all right, great. That means trucks and trailers and marketing and I do not want to manage that. Great. We can have a crystal clear conversation around what you want your business to look like. But until you take it to that next level and say, what does that practically mean? We can't know if that's the business that we actually want to set out to build. And so looking at that personnel, who do we have? Who do we need to grow into? And then taking it one step past that and like, all right, with that team, who do we work best with, right? Like, who is our ideal client? This is a big part of what we talk about. Who do we really want to work with? And maybe more importantly, who do we not want to work with, right? Who have we been burned by in the past? Or, job sizes even of great. We don't want to take on any jobs that are less than $2,000 or less than $20,000, depending on what you're doing. And no, we just can't stay profitable and work with some of these clients. It's super, super powerful for them to understand where they're headed financially, to allow that to then build out the future team in an org chart for what's going to fit that. And then look at, all right, who are the clients that we need to chase to hit those numbers and satisfy kind of the sales goals and the operational goals of that size team.
So I sat in on a coaching call of one of yours yesterday. And to me, I would talk about that image of what you saw yesterday, because this is a business that is potentially doubling in growth, already doing 7 figures. So that's a massive, massive shift in growth. And yet he made that sort of cancerous statement saying, I don't want to say no. I don't want to say no. Yeah. And so talk about the big people and sort of the smaller jobs that you were having to walk him through.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's so easy when you're getting started in business, because you get in a bad habit of feeling like you have to say yes to every dollar that could potentially come into your business. And so was sitting down with just an awesome, awesome business owner yesterday, and he was talking about that. He just signed an $850,000 contract the other day for some commercial work. And yet he's over here doing a $75 silt fence install, and he's sending a whole truck over there to do this and this and this. Well, it might lead to this. And he's like, but I know we don't make any money on that. And it's just a distraction, right? But if we've never actually sat down and we actually got to walk him through that, right? Of we got to learn to say no. Because saying no is going to free you up for the work that only you need to be doing, We can let somebody else do the $300 silt fences. And now maybe the silt fence is a part of the bigger job. Maybe it's a $50,000 job and it's a small line item on that. That's okay, because we've got a crew on there and they're doing more work. But these little one-offs here and there that are really distracting us from the work that we need to do are preventing us from reaching our vision at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and that leads, so you've got the timeline, you've got the family freedom, you've got the finances, you got the team, you've got the ideal service or product that we've got to deliver. Are we delivering high end X or low end Y or whatever it is? And then that ideal client. Actually, why don't you talk about it's a tool you built for us. It's that 26-point ideal client checklist.
Yeah.
We'll not be holding to it religiously, but it certainly is a guide for us.
Yeah, absolutely. No. So we were a little frustrated a couple of years ago of just really trying to figure out how do we narrow down and not just throw out a cast net, but how do we start looking for the right fit? And so, yeah, I built out an ideal client checklist of about maybe 25 to 30 qualifiers, and so we said, all right, of all the clients who've gotten the most out of what we do, what is the common thread that weaves its way through all of them, and we wrote those down and we kind of gave those a weight, right? They get 3 points. Then we wrote another probably 10 down and we said, all right, these are what most of the ones that succeed kind of have in common. And so, we gave those a smaller weight of 2 points. And then, all right, here's the icing on the cake, the ones that, if they have these, we know that they will be a great fit. And we gave those a little bit smaller of 1 point. And so as we're doing sales calls with people, we are scoring the potential client and writing down at the end, hey, if they score, less than 30 points, we may still work with them. In fact, a lot of them we probably do, but we know that, all right, they are not our ideal client. If you're 30 to 40 points or whatever the scale was, we know you're probably going to be a pretty good fit. And if you're that 40 to 50, like you're an ideal client, like we got to do what we got to do to get that person as a part of the Business on Purpose family. And I think what it allows you to do, Scott, because I think there's a common misconception there of, well, if they're not our ideal client, we 100% don't work with them. And it's like, that may be true. It may not be, but it at least gives you a filter through which to know, all right, we're running up against some things and up against a wall, and to be able to go back to that checklist and say, yep, we saw this coming from a long way away, and they're pushing back on some things that we could have seen coming from day one,
Yeah. And the question is, do you know who you work for best? And do you know who really sort of drains the life out of the mission that you're going to? We had an outdoor landscape services contractor that they work in the neighborhoods they work in. There's a lot of gated communities, and they started identifying the gated communities that best aligned with the service that they offer. And they had a significant number, I would say probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% of their business, that they went to those neighborhoods and they cut off service to those neighborhoods because they were not, and they made it up within 6 months by focusing in on these other neighborhoods. And now in spades, they're actually doing less work with more generative revenue than they were doing those other neighborhoods that are there, because they understood their ideal client. So take us home with that last 7th segment, which is so important in the vision story.
Yeah, this is the one that I love in its culture, right? It's, do we know who we want to be as a business? And really 2 pieces to this, right? Of an external piece of what are people saying about us, right? If I were to walk into the local Chick-fil-A and overhear somebody sitting at the table and their family, and they're telling somebody about what working with Business on Purpose felt like, or whatever your business is, what are the phrases that we want coming out of their mouths? Man, we just felt like there was communication was strong from start to finish. We felt like they had our best interest in mind. Some phrases like that if you don't know what you want to come out of their mouth, you don't really have a plan to get there, and it's just, well, we hope we did a great job and yippee. And that's not going to cut it at the end of the day. So this external piece, but also the internal of, all right, if we're looking at our employees, if we were to dial a phone number of one of their best friends and they were to talk their best friend into coming to work for us, what are the things that we want coming out of their mouth as they try to gush about who we are? It's just, man, things like fair pay, and they really care about me more than just what I produce. It's a healthy work-life balance. all that stuff. What do we want our employees? How do we want them raving about us? And I think we forget some of that sometimes, and we just kind of say, well, culture just happens, and well, we got to get work done. We'll worry about culture, later. And yet, if it's not intentionally built out, culture creates itself in a lot of ways if we're not intentional about building the culture. What else would you kind of say there?
We go and we talk a lot. You were talking about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago in Austin, and we were talking about it in Vegas when we were out there, was this idea that, and we'll talk about this way in depth with the culture calendar later on in some of these episodes. But the idea that culture is a verbiage borrowed from science. It's not a business language. It's a science language that business has sort of brought into its sphere. And this idea that it's like a petri dish. It's whatever ingredients you put in the petri dish and submit it to heat, moisture, light, time, something's going to grow out. And the question was, what grows out? Well, the answer is whatever you put in. And if we put intentional things in, then intentional things will grow out. If we put unintentional, sort of just whatever comes to us in, then that's what's going to grow out. And so if we take that layer of culture, we have to set the vision, because when you're outlining the snapshot of the future destination of your business, well, it's got to look, it's got to smell, it's got to feel. Well, that's all the scientific cultural elements of that. So you stack that as a base on top of the time, the family freedom, the finances, the team, the ideal client, the ideal service that you've got. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a picture to be able to share. And in sharing that picture, that's where clarity starts to get laid out, so that the team can grab hold of that. Without that, you're just sort of mandating everything that comes.
So I want to pause here, because I feel like this can feel overwhelming, right? Of this, what you're telling me, that's all of, I gotta know all of that. Yeah, you do, because at the end of the day, I think what happens, and Scott, I know you've seen this a handful of times, of so often we just throw a dart against the wall and we go up and we circle a bullseye around it. And we say, hey, we're hitting, we hit the bullseye. And you're like, no. We never had the target on the wall in the first place. And so building out this vision story really is just putting the bullseye on the wall. And I think the freedom as a business owner is there to say, hey, this is a living, evolving document. And now we need some traction on it, right? We need some momentum and some destination, but pieces of it can change, right? Like, and I think knowing where we're headed distinguishes us from everybody else that is just trying to say, hey, we're just going to try to be successful. And it kind of leaves it in this gray area. And so I was going to ask if you would talk a little bit about this. People always want to link mission and vision and values all together. Talk a little bit, we've kind of talked about this vision story. Why do we separate mission and vision and values? And then how do maybe they go together a little bit, just in what you've seen working with your clients?
Well, one of the reasons we separate them is because so many people try to jam them together. So we gotta subdivide these things, because they're very different. A lot of times when we walk into a business, you'll see a mission statement on the wall, and then right next to it, you'll see a vision statement on the wall. And it really just looks like they took the mission statement, rearranged the words, and put vision statement on it. And it says fundamentally the same thing, which is not much at all, usually. A vision is a multi-page, so hundreds of words, detailed snapshot of the future of the business. And so if I were to say, hey, we're going to Seattle, well, that didn't tell me anything. What's Seattle? So describe Seattle for me over multiple pages. Describe the ethos, the people, the location, the geography, the weather, all these categories, right? And then I'm going to jump to values. So I'm going to skip mission and come back to it. I'm going to jump to values. In order to get to Seattle, let's say we drove, well, there are curbs along the side of the interstates and the highways and the roads to get to Seattle. That's what your values are. They're the curbs along the side of the road to keep you in bounds. If you're a sportsman or a sportswoman, it's the sidelines. It's the boundaries of the court or the field that you're playing on. Whereas there is a definitive out of bounds, but within bounds, there's all sorts of freedom to be able to play and put on display the skill set that you have. So these values, what we call unique core values, we don't want any more than 5, and we don't want them to be integrity, respect, responsibility. Those are Enron's core values. We want these things to be unique. So for example, some of our core values: work is faith, relentless learning, write it down. Those are things that are unique. You can find those on our website, mybusinessonpurpose.com. I think on the homepage now, we've got our values there. And so you can see the curbs that we hold ourselves within to go to the detailed snapshot, which we have written down on about 5 pages that will review 6 times a year. In fact, ours is coming up at the time of this recording next week for us to be able to go over again. So the mission is tucked there in the middle. If the vision is a detailed snapshot, multiple pages, the values are 3 to 5 key words that are unique to us and maybe not to you. The mission is why you're doing it. Why the heck are you going to Seattle? And why are you holding yourselves to the boundaries of these highways and roads in order to get there? Well, the reason I'm going is fill in the blank, less than 10 or 12 words, because if you make it longer than that, nobody's going to remember it anyway. So it's got to be power packed. So for us, it's to liberate owners from chaos, to make time for what matters most. That's why we do what we do, but that's not where we're going. Where we're going is the detailed snapshot in that vision.
I think, man, it makes so much sense there. And really the three have to go together, right? Like they have to be built in tandem, because like you said, if we've got that destination of our vision, if we've got our core values of kind of the sidewalls keeping us on track, and then we know why we're going there, like that equips your team to go, you know what I mean? And rather than, well, we don't really know what we're doing or why we're doing it or where we're going, you know, like it's just a job. And I think what I've talked to several of the key leaders that we work with, at some of the businesses that we work with, it's such a gift to them, right? Of seeing all three of these, right? Because they're like, hey, I know who we are and where we're going. And if they have the choice, right, to look and say, all right, I can work for business X that pays me this, and they don't really know where they're going, or I can work for this business that's actually got it dialed in, and I can tell they've thought through it. And in fact, we'll get to this down the road too, but in our hiring process, we share all of this, right? Because we want them more attracted to our vision and where we're headed and who we are as a business than we do the paycheck. You know, I don't want to get stuck there, but it's powerful and it brings the right people into the business. And so, I know we are butting up against our time right here, but Scott, give me, if you had 3 quick things to make sure we talk about before we kind of finish this up, what would your 3 things be when it comes to vision?
I hope this doesn't offend, but be a grown-up around vision. It's a very simple process. It's not easy, but it is simple. And stop thinking like a kindergartner around it, like it's some sort of cartoon narrative that just gets put on the shelf. Be a grown-up. People want vision. There's a reason that this is a centuries-old concept and is still around. And so, again, please don't be offended by that. We believe you're grown-ups, but the reality is a lot of times we don't treat vision as a grown-up tool. And so we need to treat it like a grown-up tool. The second thing, as I think through this, is go back and understand, commit to repeating this over and over again. I mentioned earlier, we do it every other month. And so we have what we call Vision Day. It's not a whole day, it's just an hour, but we'll all hop on a call together and I'll literally read through our vision top to bottom. Sometimes there's a little glazed eyes. That's okay. It's just the repetition of that. But then afterwards, we add a cool little wrinkle. We call it green, yellow, reds. And I spend a few minutes beforehand just going, all right, green flags, what things are we really crushing right now? Yellow flags, what things do I see that I'm a little nervous about, but I'm not super worried about? And then maybe 1 or 2 red flags. These are the things, guys, if we don't get right, they can take us out. And then we add that to the vision. And that's been really, really helpful. And the third thing is get your calendar and go set time. As soon as you get done with this podcast, go set time to sit and write it down. Again, one of our 5 core values, write it down. Go write it down, because if you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. Well, Scott, I've got it in my head. I know it's in your head and nobody else can get it. You have to write it down in order for it to exist.
No, I love that. Great stuff. I think the 3 things I would say, you said write it down, and I'll echo that, because I think, right, I've got 3 kids under 5. Okay. You talk about a fog zone and it's right here between my ears. And so for me to speak about a vision 6 months from now, I'm not going to remember what I said. And so if it's not written down, there is nothing holding me to that. No, I didn't say that. I don't remember saying that. And so when it's written down and expressed that way, I think we can actually make sure that we're getting momentum and we're staying on track towards that. So I can't agree more with you. Write it down. Second thing, make it specific. We talked about that in the family and freedom section, right? Get granular, right? I want to know, if you're talking about Seattle, I want to know what the grass looks like. I want to know what the buildings look like. I want to know what the weather feels like, not just, hey, let's get in this 100 by 100 square mile segment. No, Let's put a really crystal clear, granular destination in mind so that we can put a plan in place for how to get there.
Good. Yeah.
And then the third thing I would say is look at it often and get accountability in looking at it often. Obviously we're business coaches, so we love diving in on that stuff with people. I don't care if it's another business owner for you. Schedule a lunch 6 times this year, and I want you to let them ask you questions about your vision. Hey, what's the progress on this? What are you doing to make inroads here, or whatever it is? And then ask them the same, because I think without accountability, there's always going to be a better time to work on your vision. There's always going to be a better time to implement it. And yet I would take, we always say this, right? I'd take a half-baked plan with full implementation over a full-baked plan with half implementation. We take it every day, because vision without implementation is hallucination. No, get that accountability and make sure they're holding you accountable towards going and running full speed after your vision there. So, man, this has been really fun. Any final thoughts from your end?
I love these conversations today. I think the biggest thing is make sure to go to mybusinessonpurpose.com/roadmap, and you'll see as we're guiding ourselves through this conversation with the same roadmap that we guide our clients through. And so you can watch that journey unfold right in front of us. So we start today with vision, and then we'll start to get into bank accounts and a variety of other things, but you can see. And then Thomas, you've done a great job on that interactive roadmap, where once you go, if you click on those little icons, Thomas has about a 2 to 3 minute little quip on each one as well, which would be really, really helpful. So you'll be well versed in a lot of this stuff. If you got a DIY bone in you, by all means, fire away. That's how this podcast got started. Actually, I listened to a guy named Pat Flynn on how to start a podcast. And we started this about 8 years ago at the time of this recording, and back in 2015. And so if you got a DIY bone, then dive in. If you don't, then go to mybusinessonpurpose.com/coaching or application. It's one of the others, but you can check that and reach out to us.
Awesome. Well, hey, just to close out our time, really, really fun. Get some times to kick around this. Y'all can tell we're passionate about it. Scott and I pour vision in our cereals in the morning and make sure we get a taste of it every single day. So again, head on over to mybusinessonpurpose.com/roadmap. Check out kind of where we're headed. 2 other things just to put on your radar. If you don't know where your business kind of stacks up against the things that we truly value, we've got what we call our Healthy Business Owner Assessment. Take you about 6, maybe 7 minutes tops. Ask you some questions about the things that we really value and that are going to help build the business that you want. Head on over to mybusinessonpurpose.com/healthy. You can take that assessment and then set up a call with one of our coaches. We'd love to go over that with you. No questions asked there. We just want to point you in the right direction and help give you some guidance there. And then last thing, if you're not subscribed to this podcast, make sure you hit subscribe. We want this thing delivered to you fresh. So when you're driving, so you can send it to your teams, you can listen to it. And just make sure that this stuff is sent right to your phone, right to your email every single week when it's coming out. So, hey, we will be diving in on more of these conversations about once a week. So thank you for joining us, Scott. Thanks for the time, man. And we will look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.